Okay.
I did get the email, by the way.
Now, if you're an outboard guy, we'll excuse you. If you want to bear with us for a while, that's fine. But inboard boats, most of us have inboard boats, and we have some kind of an arrangement where the drive shaft goes through the hull into the water to where our propeller is. That's how the boat drives. The IO guys and the outboard guys, it's not going to pertain to you, but all of our inboard boats have some kind of a device like that. Okay, you got water on the outside. That water's under pressure because the weight of the boat's pushing down on the whole thing. So there's substantial pressure outside. This is where the water is. Okay, you don't want water inside the boat, right? So there has to be some kind of a device to keep the water under pressure from coming through this seal. Now, this technology probably goes back to the 1800s, I don't know. It is old technology. Now, somebody is going to say, well, now they've got dripless, sealed packings and all that. That's true. And those can be retrofitted to our old boats. But most of us have something similar to this. Now, Tom has seen lots of cases where somebody has a wooden boat, or maybe even fiberglass or a steel or an aluminum hull boat. It's got a packing like this, and they said, well, that old boat leaks. It just leaks all the time. I can't stop it. The bilge pump runs. It must have a bad bottom. Very often, the problem is either here or here. There's two of these packings. This one's on the rudder. If you can imagine the rudder being down here, this is in the very back of the boat. The steering mechanism goes up this way. This packing is, in most cases, identical to the shaft packing. What's the difference? This shaft turns maybe 20 degrees, right and left. There's no constant rotation. But it does have water pressure the same as this one here does. And we'll talk about that in a minute when we get to adjusting. This packing, this shaft runs anywhere from going backwards in reverse to maybe 4,000 or 5,000 RPMs. This turns at engine speed. So you've got a tremendous amount of friction at this joint. Okay, the packing itself in the old days was some kind of a organic, fibrous stuff. Probably a jute packing or something like that. It may or may not have been saturated with paraffin, some kind of oil, something like that. Like I said, it's very old technology. You see these on steam engines, it dates way back. Same kind of thing. What we're going to do this morning, after I talk here for just a minute, I've got 1, 2, 3, we've got several of these, and we've got some packing. We're going to divide up into some small groups. We're going to let you come up here and actually take one of these apart and put some new packing in.
I'm not allowed to play with sharp objects.
Okay, well, keep the scissors and the knives away from Tom. The packing itself, like I said, it relies on friction of the packing to hold tight against this shaft to keep the water out while still allowing the shaft to turn with some degree of freedom. There is friction in there. It does develop heat. We'll say a little bit about adjustment. After you get this all adjusted, does anyone know a rule of thumb on how much this is supposed to leak in operation? Tom?
6 to 10 drops per minute in operation.
6 to 10 drops. Okay, what are we talking about? When the shaft is turning, you're running down the lake. This thing is turning at engine speed, which could be up to, like I said, 2,000, 4,000 RPM. In case of Dan's boat, it may run 6,000 RPM because he likes to go really fast. Okay.
Yeah, baby.
This thing is not moving. This thing's moving a whole bunch of RPMs. There's a tremendous amount of friction in here. You still have to keep most of the water out. To lubricate this packing, it has to have water passing through it. water being the lubricant in this case. Okay, the rule of thumb is 6 to
10 drops.
6 to 10 drops, and then see drip, 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 about that fast.
Right.
While it's running. Okay, stop your boat, put it away for the heat. How many drops is it supposed to drip?
20 to 30 minutes, it ought to seal back up.
0 is what I say.
Yeah.
If I'm going to leave my boat in the water overnight, I don't want this thing to leak. It shouldn't leak. It doesn't have to leak. So that's where your adjustment comes in. Okay, that's on the propeller shaft. The rudder shaft, you can get by with really tightening this thing down. You've got a lot of leverage in your steering. I would rather see this thing tightened down a lot snugger. You don't want any leakage here. There's still going to be some friction. There's still going to be some lubrication, but you don't need as much water lubrication here. So I really like to tighten this thing down. Another reason is this is not sitting out here in the wide open spaces for you to see. In your boat, way down under the gas tank, way in the back of the boat, you have to crawl on your hands and knees. You have to bang your elbows and your knuckles to get to it.
Pull the fuel tank out.
Pull the fuel tank out in some cases. It may be even behind the fuel tank. You got a 20-engine boat, there's 2 of them back there. So I like to really snug this thing down tight. Just to the point where you can still steer it, but you've got a lot of friction. Because this one's a hard one to get to. You don't have to go back there and mess with it later. I have seen these where the boat goes into water, it's squirting around. It's just literally squirting up like this, like a little fountain. Your bilge pump is going to run wide open all the time. You're going to have a problem. I've also seen situations where a guy restored his boat, did everything, put it all back together, backed it down on the ramp into the water. The water was squirting out. He didn't change the packing or he didn't tighten the packing. So these are important. You want to keep the water on the outside of the boat, not on the inside. I'm going to start passing a couple of these around and let you look at it. Okay, how does it work? In most cases, this nut screws off. Let's do this real quick. The nut screws off. So you take it off. No, not really. You can't take it off. You can raise it up maybe that far. Inside is this packing material. I'm going to show you some of the packing material, but it's just fibrous stuff. And if you want to, feel free to go ahead and you may need to use a pocket knife, work that out. How this thing works, it squeezes that packing. When you tighten this down, it squeezes that packing around the shaft. Might go ahead and push that around. This is another type of through hull for a shaft. It's made a little bit different. Start that around. Now Tom has already talked to you about these clamps, so I won't go into that. These are,
You know, inspecting that section of hose is important too.
yes, talk about that now. This little section of hose right here, somebody like to come up and get one of these others? This little section of hose, what's that made for? There's got to be some flexibility because of engine vibrations and so forth. There needs to be a little bit of flexibility between this part that's bolted down and this part up here. Sometimes the shaft is not quite straight. You'll see those things, they'll move just a little bit. There needs to be some flexibility. Now, being rubber hose, it's got a life. And the ones that I'm going to show you are old. They've been taken out of a boat, and they've probably reached the end of their life. They're shot. They're hard. They're deteriorated. They're going to leak. The clamps no longer can hold them tight. These things should be replaced. Don't replace it while the boat's in the water.
When you're looking at a hose like that and you look at the end of it, on a hose that's going south, that end will start to swell sometimes.
Yeah, and you can see this one here. You take your thumbnail and pick at it, and it's hard as it's brittle. It'll just flake off. Now, I've done you a favor this morning. I've loosened all these off. That's the next problem. When it's in your boat, this jam nut, which keeps it from turning, will grow itself on there, and they are a bad word to get off. You need some kind of tools to get these things loose. And here's a couple of examples to loosen this jam nut to get it off. Now, if the shaft is leaking, usually you can back this jam nut off and give it a tighten, and you can stop it. Now, the way to see if you got it too tight, you tighten it up and you say, well, it's no longer dripping. Well, that's not a good thing if you're running down if you're underway. You want it to drip just a little bit for lubrication. If you can reach back here and put your hand on it, don't be afraid to do that with somebody else driving the boat. Put your hand on it. If it feels too hot to touch, you got a problem. There should not be that much heat. It might feel warm if your engine's running at full throttle. It might feel warm, but it should not ever feel too hot to be uncomfortable to touch. Now, the one that's going around here with the shaft on it, or the hub, where did it go? Okay, no, not that one. The one that's blue.
Is this the one you're talking about?
Yeah, okay. That flange on the end is painted blue. That attaches to the engine. Now see that set screw sticking way out? That set screw attaches the hub to the shaft. See how far it's sticking out? That thing, it could really hurt somebody. That thing's spinning really fast. If you're down in there checking this thing to see if it's too hot, and you get too close to that, it's going to grab your britches leg and cause you to have a bad day. It can really mess you up. So we don't like to see that. We like to see either a roll pin, a flush set screw. At best, you don't want that nut sticking out far enough to hurt you. And it really should be safety wire.
Larry,
Yes.
to replace the hosing, you'd have to pull the shaft, would you not?
Yep.
Yeah. To replace this section of
You got to pull the prop.
engine's right here.
Right.
It could be way up here, but you still can't get this off of the end of the hose. So what you're going to have to do is go down underneath, pull the shaft out, take this off, and replace it with a new piece of hose.
And for that particular reason, buy the best quality hose you can.
Absolutely. That's a lot of work, and you don't want to scrimp on that.
Oh, I got a deal on that. Yeah, I just replaced mine in my cruiser last week. It took like 4 days to do both of them. And the marina says there's a special wound rubber to use, like you just can't use an exhaust hose or something. It's a special hose for that, so it doesn't twist and unravel itself.
That's not true. Exhaust hose is perfectly suitable.
What was that?
Exhaust hose, he says is suitable.
Yeah, just got to want the wire in it.
It needs to be reinforced stiff hose.
Yeah, the wire.
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm sure there's a standard for that. I've never seen a standard, but basically get the best hose you can. Hydraulic hose that's suitable for 3,000 to 6,000 pound hydraulic pressure is going to be great.
Look for hoses that are resistant to oils and fuels, petroleum products.
A hydraulic hose is probably, without going to something special, I'm sure West Marine can sell you. You go around to one of these hydraulic shops that make hoses for heavy equipment. They usually throw away pieces that's 3/4 feet long. You know, you can get that stuff. They'll probably give you that much. That's all you want.
Getting the coupler off that shaft is quite a problem.
Can be.
Okay, that same one that I'm passing around, you can see lots of hammer marks on the shaft. Somebody's taking a hammer and just...
That is, you can't get a puller on it, but you can get a little piece of, it's smaller than the bore of your shaft, like a quarter, say 1 inch. Hold the coupler back, put that in there, and use the coupler bolt, and then you tighten that back up, that push the shaft out. I might have to do that 2 or 3 times.
I've done that with sockets. Yeah.
That's another problem area, getting the hub off. That's kind of beyond the scope of what we're talking about here. But getting that flange off the shaft can really be a bear sometimes. I've seen them literally fall off, And other times I've seen them where they're just so seized on there, it takes a lot of work to get them on. Sir?
How many coils do you put on the shaft put up in the nut?
Of the packing itself,
Yes.
it's going to tell you, when you look at that, you can see how much room there is in there. Usually about 4. And if you take one of these, go ahead and spin it off. Okay, this is something that's probably been added. It looks like mop string. And it may be. Plumbers have stuff like this that you can buy it saturated with gum of some sort, wax, I don't know what. This looks like mop string. You know what? This will work in a pinch if it's all you have. The stuff that they put in there is more fibrous and it's woven, but it's square. It's not round. And
it comes in different sizes too.
yeah. Here's a 1/4 inch. The big one, like this, that's 1 1/4 inch shaft. Uses 1/4 inch square packing. That's it. And the 1 inch shafts, most of them typically use 5/16. No, 3/16 packing. Now this packing here is white. Guess what? It's Teflon. This is the newer stuff. It's great.
There's a green one too, I was thinking.
Okay, here's the original stuff. Now notice this. It's not a long string. It's individual pieces. And this is what we're going to do. We're going to cut a piece of this stuff long enough to go around the shaft one time. Then we're going to cut the ends at a 45-degree angle so that they overlap, like this. Okay? That way you don't have a gap in there. Even though this is probably going to tighten down enough to seal, you don't have a gap. So we're going to cut these ends at a 45-degree overlap. One ring, and we'll make another ring. Actually, I don't have enough of this stuff to do it, but we're going to do one. Here's another ring. It's got a 45-degree overlap. And when you put them in, you stagger these. This one goes that way, this one goes that way, and you pack them in there like that. If you had another ring, you'd stagger it, another ring, you'd stagger it, so that you don't have a channel that water goes through. This stuff, if you're out in the lake and you can't get the thing to stop, but you can get it apart, you can probably unravel your sweater or your jeans, put something in there. It'd be better if it was oil soap, but that's what someone's putting in this one. And it'll work for a while. I'll get you back. Okay. Questions up to this point? Anybody? Okay. What I'd like to do, some of you have done this. It's old hat. Some of you have not done it. What I'd like for you to do is come up here and get one of these things, and we'll take it apart and let you cut a piece of new packing and put in there. Cut it where it overlaps. When you cut it, wrap it around something approximately the right size. You take your knife. All of you got knives, right? Pocket knives. Every good sailor needs a knife. And cut it at a 45-degree angle. You cut down on this wood. Don't cut on the shaft. You can nick it. If you nick the shaft or even make a mark, it's going to grind that seal all up. So cut it like this, cut your other 45, and then we'll put them together. Ready? Okay, here. Go ahead.
When you're pulling that packing out of the nut, it can be a pain. And they make like a little, I have never had a glove, but it's like a little screw, corkscrew looking thing, you screw it in there, kind of helps pull it out. It's okay if you can get to it. On my carver, I can't get to any of that. I have to pull the damn thing out.
Well, here's the problem. So you're down in the boat. First of all, it's an attractive place to be. And you can only slide this up about that far. Okay, so you got to go in there, and you're going to be working like this.
While you're standing on your head.
While you stand on your head. Yeah, right. So that's what makes it fun. Now here's another type packing. All these that I passed around, you've got a jam nut that squeezes that together. Here's another type, and I think Century and some of the other guys use these. Same process, except instead of having a nut that you tighten down, you've got a sleeve with a couple of bolts. The packing goes down in there, like this. And this thing pushes down on it. When you tighten these, it squeezes together and squeezes that packing around the shaft. So there's another style. There may be others, Tom.
Comment on the ones with the nuts on them. They do come in left and right.
I wonder why. Anybody got an idea why they come in left and right?
So they don't unscrew each other.
Exactly. Hey!
Well, my point being, don't destroy one of them trying to unscrew it when you're turning it the wrong way.
Yeah, that jam nut keeps it from turning, but if it were to turn, you want it to tighten rather than loosen.
Right.
Okay? If it were to grab C's or whatever, and sometimes they do, you want it to tend to tighten itself rather than loosen itself.
And you don't really have to bear down monkey jack.
No.
Jam that, you'll never get that off.
Well, you don't need to do that. And you also don't, a lot of times you can tighten this by hand, especially initially. Take it out and run it a while, and then come back, it's dripping because that stuff is still packing together. And you might want to do that 2 or 3 times before you get where you're happy with the amount of drips. But it doesn't take a tremendous amount of pressure. You want to get the lock nut just tight enough to keep it from turning. If some of you came in here early, you heard me back here this morning pounding on daylights out of this thing, because these were all stuck. They do.
They make a plumber's wrench that has square jaws
Right.
that move this way. They work great for those.
Yeah, and they're cheap. I've also seen them where someone has made them. You can buy them. West Marine sell them, different ones
I follow those, they break.
that are just that size.
You're honking down on it too hard.
Yeah. Okay, let's come up here and grab one of these things, and I'll get this packing out here and we'll experiment with it.
I had a couple of experiences. One, I bought a boat. Larry and Jan hauled it back from California, and I had a leak. And I thought it was it's kind of back under the engine. This assembly is kind of back under the engine. And so I thought, well, it's just a leak. I went in and played all weekend with it, and Bill's supposed to run it all the time. So when I got it home, I put the big wrench on here to loosen the big nut, and the hose right here just twisted in two. It was just so rotten that it was just barely hanging on. And of course, the boat would have sunk if it had gone ahead and ripped in two. And then Paul Hastings, where are you? We were just talking a minute. Paul, you had a comment about the shaft pack. You said, share that with me real quick, would you? Yeah, go ahead. Come on up.
You can comment on the Houston story?
The Houston story, about how it locked up.
Yeah. I was at the launch ramp, Wheels and Heels, and new owner of the boat, not a new boat, he's a new owner. Put it in the water, start it up, let it warm up a little bit, put it in gear, engine died. Did this about 3 times, and one guy standing there says, well, rev it up a little bit, throw it in gear. He did. All this racket. I said, get it off. Got in, I got in the boat, let me look. I said, what about the shaft lock? Have you fooled with it? He said, what's that? I said, this thing right back here. He said, oh yeah. He said, the owner told me to keep that pipe. Well, I think he put like a 3-foot pipe wrench on it, but he had pulled it down so tight that it had twisted the rubber. Well, we loosened it up. He started it and everything was fine. But he thought that he was really doing a wonderful job by getting it as tight as he could get it. It didn't kill the engine. I mean, it was either going to, it was spinning, but it was going to tear that rubber coupling. It was going to hose. It would have torn it loose before he would have got around to stop. But just not knowing.
Bob Kadak had an experience too. We were talking a minute ago.
Yeah, I had a situation. I've got a 1937 custom
And it's got a larger engine than was original. It's only got this much room to move there. But my hose on the shaft was not very big, and it was also getting old and soft. And I knew this, but I couldn't get the shaft out to change it. And I took the boat for a run, tied up my dock, and it was going out getting ready to take another cruise. And I opened up the hatches, just sniffed and looked around. I happened to notice that hose, instead of being about this long, was about this long. What happened? It had twisted. So the nuts were loose. It had twisted. If I had taken it and gone for a ride, it probably would have twisted off, and what would have happened then? So I just paddled it over to my railway and put it in the boathouse until I could get somebody to come help. And we actually had to get a slide hammer to get the shaft out.
Something else you were going to add to kind of in finish?
Well, we're going to wait till later to see how it's done. Somebody asked about the cutlass bearing. I've got one of those here. If we have time, we'll talk about that later.
We've got time right now.
Okay, cutlass bearing. This bearing is in your strut. You know what I'm talking about. The old ones, the early ones up until probably the end of the 30s, early 40s, this thing was brass. Sand would get in there and so forth. It would chew it up, and also chew up the shaft. Goodyear, during I think World War II or something, I don't know when, Goodyear came out with what they call a rubber cutlass bearing, and that's what you need to have if you don't have it. This is a brass tube with a rubber lining. If you notice, you look down through there, that rubber lining's got grooves all the way, maybe 12 grooves all the way around. The reason for that is it's water lubricated. Okay, when your shaft is in there, it's turning 2,000 RPMs on my boat, 6,000 RPMs on Dan's boat. That's pretty fast. Okay, the water has got to go through there and lubricate this. Now these things can get worn out. They're pretty darn durable. They last a long time. If you notice, I'll pass this around. This is fairly snug. That's just about right. But it's got to be maintained. These can be replaced. Once again, this is inside of your strut. They can be replaced. They should be replaced if needed. You don't want to run this thing dry, like if it's on the trailer on the boat ramp and you say, well, I'm going to put it in gear and run it a while. If your shaft is turning, this thing's going to be extremely hot. It doesn't have any water lubrication, but underway, it's water lubricated. Any questions about that? They can be replaced.
How much play in your shaft if that's bad?
Yeah, how do you know if it's bad?
Yeah, you'll get vibration. You should be able to get back there and get hold of your prop and work it this way a little bit. If you can work it very much and you can see that the shaft is playing inside this and you need to replace it. The old brass ones, they get really loose because they'd not only wear out the brass lining here, they'd actually wear this thing down to the point that it gets really sloppy. But the rubber ones are the way to go. This again is not new technology, but it's something to be aware of. That's how that works.
Where do you get new ones?
You can order them through West Marine. Most of your bigger Marine service places can get them for you. Probably going to be a special order item, but they can get them.
You can, Morris makes those, a company called Morris. And if you have an allied bearing,
Right.
and you wear your locale, Oklahoma City, or Tulsa, or
These
whatever.
are also used in other applications besides that.
It's a lot cheaper to do.
Yeah, they're not cheap. They're kind of expensive, and you have to have some kind of a puller to get it in and out, but they can be replaced.
I Googled, I just put in cutlass bearing, Googled it, it gave me several sources.
I bought one out of Florida, and I got it really cheap.
Yeah, I did. I paid, on Alicia's boat, I had to put new ones in, they were about $90 a pop. They were,
They're not cheap.
they're not cheap.
That's why you don't want to run it on the trailer on the driveway, because that thing, you can run one really quick.
Since they asked,
I'm going to give Paul a shaft right now.
since they asked, I'm gonna put my 2 cents worth in. I have towboats I have an aluminum cruiser, and I've also had steel cruisers. And I don't know if any of y'all ever had a steel or aluminum boat, but the first thing is never put a brass or stainless bearing in a steel or aluminum boat. At the Little Rock Yacht Club, which we happen to be the proud owners of, and I think proud, but we pulled a boat in my backyard. It was a steel-hulled, small 35-foot roamer, Chris-Craft roamer. And the strut was almost eaten completely off of it. So somebody prior to us, they had put a brass back bearing in a steel strut. And the, help me out, galvanic corrosion, which takes place between two dissimilar metals, had eaten almost the strut completely off.
It was a steel strut?
Yeah, a steel strut. We had all of them. This boat out here that's got steel struts on it. We cut the tube off and put a new tube, both sides, put new tubes on it. But that's one thing, if any of you ever know someone or you ever get into a steel or aluminum boat, you use a fiber back bearing. It's got the rubber end inside, but instead of having brass on the outside, it's fiber. And most of the steel or aluminum boats are set up for the fiber back bearing. Now on tugboats, we run a 6-inch bearing, but we have the rubber on the outside of the bearing. We have a stainless steel tube that's in the strut itself. So the bearing runs on reverse of what this one is. And it helps the lubrication and the sand and the trash going through. It does not get caught in between the shaft and in this part, but the stainless steel that's in the strut itself, the rubber on the outside runs in that, so the rubber is constantly turning. Where in this, it turns in the shaft. You take a 6-inch shaft with a 6-foot prop, the weight laying in the bottom will deteriorate the bottom of the rubber pretty quick. So with the rubber constantly turning, you're never running the shaft on the rubber in one spot. So we get like 4 times the life out of the bearing. And they're starting to make them for the smaller boats. Like my 2.5-inch shaft on my roamer. I'm going to that next time. But the main thing I wanted to point out is never use a brass back bushing in a steel or aluminum boat. If you ever get to that point. That's all.
Thanks. Hey, and Larry, you had to cut all these shafts off and you machine everything. You brought all these different samples. You mounted them. Larry, you always do a great job presenting programs, and you've gone to a lot of effort to make that happen. So I really thank you.